Welcome everyone to Mail Fuzz TV. I am Peter, that is Connor, and we are going to talk about Star Trek The Next Generation Season 6, Episode 14. It is called Face of the Enemy. Full spoilers for the episode as always. And this one is about Troy waking up, looking like a Romulan, and it's all a part of some plan that Spock has initiated as part of the resistance movement on Romulus. She's like, they've got her an identity where she's pretending to be a member of the Tal Shiar, and she's there to like insist they deliver this cargo somewhere. So there's a lot of this where she's kind of having to try and bluff and act her way through and pretending to be like this, like, you know, high-ranking Romulan that everyone has to listen to and answer to.
She's not very good at it, if I'm being perfectly honest.
She does better than I thought she would, to be. I mean, she's fine.
Well, no. She gets by purely on the name. I don't think she acts the part very well. I don't mean this as an actress, I mean the character of Troy, I don't think.
Oh, I think she gets a bit better as she goes. There's a couple of moments where she does sort of snap at people and kind of... but that's the gist. Eventually, obviously, we learn about what's going on in the Enterprise as well and how that kind of starts to link into the plot. But what's so funny about this is there's a moment late on in the episode where, you know, the comms come on, right? And like the Romulan ship, like, Troy convinces him to hail the Enterprise, and she appears on the screen, and obviously everyone's like, what? Right? And I was like, oh, this is a good moment, and they realize it's her and that she probably needs help and so on and so on. But part of me did think, you know, technically you already had this reveal with Tasha when she showed up as a Romulan and she wasn't the same character.
Oh yeah, you're right.
So I don't know, maybe at this point you should be like, what, another doppelganger? I suppose the benefit here is that they know Troy's not dead and she's not on the ship, so it probably is just her. But
yeah, I never thought about
that. It's an interesting thought. I did appreciate though that this was kind of a nice insight into the inner workings of how Romulans work and how they have different sects within them that, you know, believe different things. It kind of fleshed out Romulans as a people and as a civilization. You know, because the captain kind of butts heads with her and brings up stuff about how her father was, you know, executed for what he believed in. And so we got a lot of good Romulan lore, yeah. I'd say.
Seems like they're terrified of the secret police.
Mm-hmm.
Rightfully so, I would say.
By the sounds of it, yeah. So I thought that stuff was fun. What did you think of Face of the Enemy?
Yeah, I think I don't think it quite lived up to what it could have been by the end. But I think it had a lot of nice ideas. And I say you had a lot of good kind of expositions, maybe a little bit harsh. That has negative connotations, but I don't mean it in a bad way. But exposition of, like I say, Romulan lore and kind of expanding that mythology of the show even further. I think it's very successful in that regard.
Yeah, because it does it a couple of ways. Obviously, there's everything that Troy's learning and having to like pretend, and the reactions to her and the conflicts that come from that. The other side of it is on the Enterprise, there's this human who is returning to the Federation after he defected to Romulus many years ago. And, you know, you hear, like, Worf and even Riker sounds a bit like, yeah, F this guy. Like, they have no interest in, like, entertaining him.
Yeah, and he talks about the things that attracted him in the first place, but, you know, kind of the appeal wore off.
Yeah, over time, yeah. I think it's interesting. It's like, okay, Worf you expect to kind of jump to these like extreme conclusions because he's the warrior and he doesn't trust people and stuff. But the fact that Riker kind of like seemingly, you know, maybe not in the exact same words, but seems to be on his side and agrees with him, that's kind of the sort of like, okay, all right. So that makes like whoever this guy's about to be more interested, because this is before he beams on. So you're getting this little teaser of like who he is and sort of what's going on. And
he's a pretty regular, if not slightly timid guy.
Yeah, he's got the Romulus uniform on, and like Riker tells him, you know, find some civvies because you're not walking around this ship dressed like that. And it turns out the reason, like, not the reason why he's defected, but there's what his defection is, or his return from defection, I suppose is the better way to put it, is being used for, is that Spock is giving him a message for the Enterprise to go and pick up this cargo, to go to this, you know, part of space, and, you know, and they're not really sure, you know. But like they're like, okay, obviously they want to work with Spock. Spock's trying to change, you know, the Romulan world and change it for the better, and sort of and clearly he's got a lot of support. Like there's other Romulans that work with them. The guy who's with Troy, who's, you know, in the plan and is kind of coaching her through it. He's part of that resistance. Their cargo turns out to be like high-ranking politicians from Romulus who are in support of a different, Romulus. So there's a lot of really interesting sort of stuff that comes from that.
I would say arguably more interesting Romulan political stuff than we actually had in the episodes where we were there, with Spock.
I agree, because we were disappointed, especially with that second part.
That's why I think this episode's really successful in that regard. I think just as a story in its own right, I don't think it's that strong ultimately by the end. It's fine, it's serviceable, but it's there just as a vehicle for the wider world, as opposed to actually be much of a story itself.
I guess I can kind of see that, but I don't think it's as much of a problem. I guess just because I found everything so fascinating to kind of like give these extra layers to Romulans in general. This power struggle where the captain, the commander on the ship, Tarth, like she does not like that there's someone here calling shots. This is very much like when the Enterprise gets an admiral on board, and the admiral's like making all these like demands. Or that's kind of what Troy's doing here. But she has to obey all these orders, and it's kind of like she's always trying to like provoke Troy, and it's not even that she suspects that she's full of shit and that she's not real. I mean, obviously that comes eventually when there's like a reason to think that, but for a long time it's just like, no, she's trying to provoke her as any way she can by bringing up certain things, by talking about how someone with your particular job, like, we assassinated the one who messed up on my last ship and things like that, and bringing up her father. And I think what's interesting about the dynamic of that is that obviously we know Troy is a sympathetic character and she's just playing the role of this hard ass, secret police type character. And it's this Romulan commander who actually ends up being more sympathetic, even though we still have to root for her to be deceived because the ultimate plan is good for everything. But in a weird way, you do actually kind of side with her, even though she is this hard ass Romulan.
I think she's quite interesting, like saying that she is hard-ass Romulan, like I say. She is following the rules. She is upholding the spirit of the Romulan law. And she's not in open rebellion. She's not part of the resistance. But clearly she's not opposed to some of their ideals. She definitely has some reservations about the state, shall we say.
Yeah, it never comes out of the episode, but you almost wonder, like, not that she could be convinced to like be on the team, if you will, but it never kind of addresses that there may be some sympathy from her in some way to the cause, even though I'm sure like she seems so by the book though that she probably would like not want to, she'd still see this as like an attack against Romulus and not go through with it. But yeah, I mean, it is quite fascinating a dynamic because you find yourself like kind of sympathizing with her a little bit when she talks about her father being killed for having like ideals, and it's this kind of like weird thing that ultimately because the guy Navek, the one who's helping Troy, and he's the one that's kind of kidnapped her. That's the thing. This is kind of against her will that she's been taken here and like altered to look like a Romulan, but she has to go along with it because now she's trapped here on this ship. She has to like it's either this or just be arrested as a member of the Federation. So she has to go through all this, and like Navek, arguably in a weird way, what he's trying to accomplish by helping Spock, get these people through, that will open up a channel to get refugees who want to leave Romulus in the future and start like more of that process. Like ultimately, he's kind of fighting for something that maybe like the commander's father would maybe be in support of. So in a weird way, even though she ultimately has him killed later, because we see him get hit with the phaser and he just completely goes. It was not set to stun; he disintegrates. There's an interesting sort of thought process to like, he's like making this sacrifice for all Romulans, and she just doesn't realize that it's kind of for her too, and for like the memory of her father, who very much did want change of some kind.
Yeah.
So
those things are definitely very interesting, and I think when it is tackling those ideas and those angles of it, it's very successful and kind of going at that approach. I just think it lacks the word. It lacks a strong plot to kind of back that up. We have this really strong captain of this Romulan ship. She's a very interesting character. I just wish she had a bit more agency, perhaps, to go with it, because she kind of just is dictated to. She makes these decisions at the end about what to do once everything's out in the open, or as open as it gets. But I just wish she had a bit more agency throughout the episode as well, because she is just taking a backseat to Troy barking orders out.
Yeah, I mean, I don't necessarily think there's a problem with that per se. I think I like this episode more than you, and I think part of it is because I do think there is some good plot in there. I think, you know, when the Enterprise shows up and they're cloaked, and it's like, okay, I'm going to sneak up and attack it, and Troy has to kind of like come up with a reason why he's not to do that, and like kind of does a decent job convincing her that this is not the right plan. I mean, obviously she gets to like, overrule her as well, but she sort of backs it up with enough logic from their perspective.
Just about, yeah.
That this is why we shouldn't do this, and then sneakily get the cargo beamed over. If I honestly, the only complaint I'd really have from a plot perspective is that when they eventually beam Troy off onto the Enterprise to save her, because at that point, like she's been found out, and Nivek's been killed, and they're going to go away, but because they're attacking and their shields are down, like they can beam her across. It does just kind of feel like I thought it was going to be harder to save her. I thought it was going to be more of like a beat, because it felt like, okay, she used her chance to beam people across and the little trick that they did with the sort of the weak fire blast to get the cargo off, to beam the 3 sleeping Romulans over. And I was like, okay, but that's left her still in peril, so how are we going to deal with that? And they end up just beaming her, and it does make sense, because when you actually stop and look at when it happens in the episode, it is when the shields would be down, because the rules have always been in Star Trek that you have to take the shields down, so you can't beam through shields. Yeah. And because they're going to cloak, their shields are going away, and therefore they can beam her off. I think that was what happened. So,
I think so,
yeah. So
it's just something though where obviously they have to be so sneaky with the plot to get the others off first, that you almost kind of go, well, if they'd beamed Troy back quick enough, she could have just gone, oh, by the way, beam those as well, almost, sort of thing, right? Is your question, I think.
I mean, I guess really all I'm saying is that the last little bit feels just a touch rushed. It's almost like there's just like, the episode's 45 minutes. It maybe had like an extra 5 minutes in it of actual, plot. And they kind of had to rush the last little part, because ultimately she gets beamed across, and then there's a scene where she's back to normal, and Picard's like, "Oh, what you've done today, and like Nivek's sacrifice is going to help all these future Romulans and like really change what Romulus is in the future. This is going to really help Spock's endeavors there." And it's like, okay, nice, yeah, there's a happy bit at the end to sort of explain this is what the result of this was. And it just feels a bit quick. It feels like it goes to that title at the end, the executive producer credit or whatever, really quick, and it's like, oh, okay. It kind of felt like they were under the gun here to like get this one in time, and
you feel like maybe they could have edited some stuff from other areas of the episode, perhaps have a more satisfying ending.
They maybe could have done. Maybe there's some parts earlier on you could. I mean, I wouldn't cut anything with the defector, because I think every scene he's in with Picard is really strong. Like, because when he's like talking about how a Romulan would react, or he's talking about how they would make certain decisions and stuff like that. Because there's a moment where when they don't find anything, because it was meant to be this other ship, like there's meant to be like a third ship who like picks up the cargo and drops it off to the Enterprise, but the Romulans blow it up because Troy can. It's actually probably the most useful her ability's ever been.
I was just thinking that, yeah. She's like, don't trust them.
Yeah, they're not going to like keep their word and like deliver the goods to I mean, it's not even it's not meant to even specifically be the Enterprise. It's just generally the Federation, like they go to an outpost or whatever. But she's like, no, they're not going to like honor this. And immediately Nivek just like destroys the ship. Which adds a bit of, great to him, because it's like, oh, he really believes in this to the point where he can't even risk them talking, so he's just going to like destroy them outright.
Yeah.
So okay, interesting. But when the Enterprise gets there and this ship's not there, and then they end up sort of detecting there's maybe an element of like destruction, like the fragments of it. Yeah. They're like, he eventually says, oh, well, we're looking for this type of ship, and this is the sort of thing we're looking for. And Picard's like, why didn't you offer all this information? And he says, well, it didn't seem relevant. And when you're, Romulans, are taught not to offer up anything that they don't need to. Like, they're taught to withhold unless something's directly asked. And I was like, that's another interesting little just thing to add to their, like, not their character, because it's a whole race, but like their culture, yeah. Like, just another thing to kind of look for when we see Romulans again is this idea of like how they talk and how they offer things up.
They may be telling the truth, but probably not the whole truth.
Yeah. And it's not even like they're being coy per se, it's just how they talk. They
because he's lived there for, what was it, 20 years, something like that. This to him, it's not an intentional withholding of dare, it's just, this is the way he's learned to live, because this is how everyone lives, there, and this is just the way he is now. It's not some conscious decision that he's made to, hold information back.
Yeah, so I thought that was interesting as well, because I thought this episode did a really good job of just fleshing out the Romulans in a lot, like, because they've been this like sort of villain that popped back up early on in the show, and
yeah,
they had some interesting stuff in the original series because they looked like Vulcans, and there was that shared connection with Spock, and like sort of figuring all this stuff out. I think this episode went a long way to really kind of just do that thing that sometimes you don't get when you've got like alien races in sci-fi, where surely there would be civil wars, there would be different belief systems in that race, whether they're religious or political or whatever. So I do like when you get like a sense of that, and I think this adds a lot to Romulans as a whole by sort of introducing that.
Yeah, we are seeing that. Like I said, we got elements of that introduced in the Spock episodes where we went there. But this here, it feels less like, that it felt like it was just this one cell that Spock had. Whereas this feels, no, there are actually general, people in the general populace that have these feelings. They're just not speaking up against the state.
Yeah, and I think the story about the commander's father is really good, because one, it's another example of some random person, but because she's talking about her father and this happened some time ago, it's like, oh, this is not like even just recently, like this is like generations of Romulans have had these ideas and beliefs and are recognizing that there should be a change, and that the current regime and how things are done aren't what everyone wants. So yeah, I think that's really good. I think it's the sort of thing, we fleshed out the Klingons a lot just naturally because of Worf and like doing his plots with and seeing how their system works.
Yeah.
And their stuff is very, like battling for the throne. Like there's a lot of that kind of stuff with the Klingons.
Yeah, their stuff's very middle-aged court politics, so to speak. Whereas this here feels a lot more 20th century, shall we say? Yeah,
it feels a lot more, I don't know if I'd call them
totalitarian.
Thank you, that's the word.
Yes. No, it does feel like we're talking more under like a. Again, we haven't got a figure to put this to, but I'm throwing out regimes under Hitler or Stalin, for example.
Yeah, I don't. The reason why I don't want to necessarily compare it to that, because I don't think it's as extreme as that per se. Like, no. I don't know if they've got concentration camps and if they're, if their leaders is.
It feels like the early days of those regimes, so to speak, where it's the public ideology. That's kind of what they're feeding into, but it doesn't feel as of yet. Again, we've maybe not just not seen enough of Romulus to really get there. It doesn't feel like there's that figurehead at the top.
No, yeah.
Gonna be in there. Like, we got a little bit with like senators and stuff, doing that stuff, when we were on Romulus. But again, there wasn't that one solid figure to kind of put it all around.
Yeah, it feels more like that's just the entire party at the top running the show feels that way, and that's how it's run.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it's funny because obviously it starts off and Troy's waking up, and it takes like a good 30 seconds or something for it to turn on a light because she's confused and she's disorientated, and she turns on the light and she's got the Romulan like makeup on, and it's like dun dun dun, and then the opening titles start. I'm like, okay, that seems like maybe a fun episode. I was getting kind of fun, maybe slightly goofy. But even the goofiness of her being a Romulan, like that wears off once you start getting to the meat of the episode, because it's like, oh, this has actually got a lot of stuff in it. It's
definitely not
lore.
Played as goofy at all.
No, it's not. Like just like seeing her in that makeup is slightly goofy at a first glance, but then once you've watched it for a minute, that's it. You're fine. You're into it. You're getting the
obviously they could have played it that route. Obviously it'd be a very different episode, but if they wanted to put her in the makeup and play the goofy route, it would have been very easy to do that.
Yeah, I think I was surprised that it was like someone kidnapped her and done this to her, and like it's all part of a plan. I think when we read the synopsis last time, it kind of sounded to me like maybe she swapped bodies, with more of a supernatural, well, maybe not supernatural, but something made her swap with someone.
Yeah, we were speculating like kind of like Freaky Friday style body swaps or things like that,
or an alternate reality or something where she's now a Romulan. But like this was more no, she's still her, and this was something that was done because they've got this crazy plan. But if anything, if I was to maybe add another little nitpick and say is like I do kind of wish she really like fought like Nivek early on and said, you drugged me, kidnapped me, and did this to me against my will, and now I'm in this dangerous situation. Like, I wish she kind of prodded him to try and justify that a bit more, because I get why he would justify it, and I get why this is all important, but I feel like from a personal perspective, she probably should be ultra pissed about this.
Acquiesces pretty quickly to the situation, relatively speaking. Obviously, she's angry, and you have a scene of that. But once he's like, you best suck it up, or they're going to just put you in, put you under arrest. Like she kind of just does. Yeah,
she maybe could have said you couldn't have like asked for me to do this. And she might have said no because she's like, I'm not qualified for this. But maybe that's the point, is that no one would agree to it. It's too crazy. But it doesn't change the fact that this was all done against her will for whatever the cause ended up being.
Again, I think that you could have explored that further and maybe gone with the angle that they think no one would have volunteered for this and no one would have done this. But I think I'm pretty sure in saying that no, someone in on the Federation, specifically on the Enterprise, would have volunteered to go undercover like this and do this mission without having to have been kidnapped.
I think if they leaned into it a bit more, it ties into Nivek blowing up the smuggler ship, is that this idea that he is doing some shadier things, like he's doing shades of grey stuff but he believes that the result is worth it, and he believes that the ends justify the means.
It plays into he really doesn't trust anyone else or a lot of other people. I don't know, we get it done. Results, kind of the methods don't matter so much as long as it it works.
Yeah, and that kind of I think that plays into something that the defector says at one point. He talks about how Romulans are taught to, if there's deceit or if there's like mistrust or something, like that's what they look for. They're always looking for that angle, and that maybe plays into, well, he's obviously still. He's got this noble cause and he wants change. He still sort of is a Romulan and he still looks for mistrust. He's still skeptical of people around him at all times. Yeah. So I suppose that's quite smart writing in that sense, that he is still that, even with his beliefs and what he's aiming for.
Even though he has different, a different ideology to a lot of Romulans, he's still part of that culture. He is still Romulan.
Yeah. Which, if anything, I think just strengthens the idea of like the whole point of this, which is to, they're still all Romulans, but even within that, like, because I'm sure like, if some aliens came along and like studied humans, they'd be like, we all have these things in common, even though we have very different groups of people who believe very different things. Like, they'd do like, but they all have.
There are probably cultural identifiers that are species wide.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And how we react to things, or how we, I don't know, make decisions or something. I'm sure there is.
I mean, probably something as simple as the family unit, and
oh sure,
that's kind of across, the entire world, right? In some form or another, there is a family unit, right? And that tends to be, a pretty important part of most cultures. Despite anything else that's in those cultures, there tends to be a family unit within there. And I think, if you were looking at that from an alien perspective, let's say hypothetically the aliens didn't have families, they were grown in vats, and they come and look at this and they're like, oh yeah, look, they've all got that.
Yeah, true. Yeah. It's just so tempting to make a joke about you right here.
Yeah, go on.
No, I'm not going to do it.
It's remarkable restraint on your part.
I'm not going to do it.
Admire your willpower.
But it's making me laugh a lot thinking about it. Anyway,
I can see that.
So what's coming next time? Obviously, I believe the next episode we're doing will be a Deep Space Nine episode, but next time on The Next Generation, we've got an episode called Tapestry. So this is episode 15. Here's the description. When Captain Picard's artificial heart fails, he is offered the rare opportunity to go back in time and set right the mistake that led to his demise. Interesting.
Okay, that sounds interesting.
Because he got that hurt in the show, right? I seem to remember a surgery where they've all got those nun outfits on. Yeah,
yeah.
I think that was in the show. Yeah. So, also pretty high rating on this one. So it's probably.
I'm not surprised. Picard introspection episode; those tend to be pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
Or at the very least, they tend to be very highly rated. Whether or not we always agree with them is slightly different, but.
Look towards your inner light. I'm sure you'll find something to like in this.
Yeah. I'm sure it's spectacular.
But yeah, that's what's coming next time on Next Gen. Like I say, it'll be Deep Space Nine next, I believe. So, and if I'm lying about that, I don't have the list in front of me right now. Then sorry.
That's a disgrace. You said to me, you're always going to have that list every time we record a Star Trek. You're going to have that list up so you can be sure when you're telling them this at the end of the episode. You getting it up now to check because I've made you feel bad about it.
I'm not doing this for you.
I guilt tripped you into it, didn't I?
Let me make this clear. I never do anything for you, right? That's the important thing here.
Yeah. You're doing it for the people, obviously.
Yes. Yes, it's Deep Space Nine next, okay? And then Tapestry. So, fight me. But let us know what you thought of this episode in the comments below. Like, subscribe, ding the bell for notifications. All that stuff. You can get us on the Twitters at mail_fudge for channel updates. And of course, you can support the show and all the content being over to patreon.com/mailfuzztv and support us on a regular basis. Or you can make a one-time donation with the super thanks button on YouTube. Anything and everything is obviously greatly appreciated. So thank you very much once again for joining us. We always appreciate it. Keep watching Star Trek. And somewhere out there, Wesley Crusher is
panicking.
I'm trying to think of some sort of Romulan joke. He's I don't know. He's infiltrated the Tal Shiar and making weird demands of.
Go on, you got this.
The Romulan children.
You did not have this.
That's a bit creepy. I don't mean that.
You did not have this.